Hello, everyone. I hope you enjoyed part one of our interview with George McMillan. Now, as I had mentioned previously, in the interest of time, we wanted to break it up so it isn't just one big 3 hour long stream because we covered a lot of ground. It can be a lot for some people to take in. And because of the editing, I'm presuming I'm recording this beforehand, that it's probably going to be another day or two. You're probably looking at Saturday or Sunday by the time you're watching part two. But I hope you enjoyed part one, and we'll get right into part two.
I just want to go back to the Middle East
Yeah.
because I covered the other areas to come back to the Middle East because what GWAT was about, if you're going to cut Germany off from Russian natural gas, and yes, if people watch the DW series of videos on that, they explain how Russian gas has always been another problem. They come right out and say if Putin can sell gas and oil east, then he can rebuild his economy. Then he can rebuild his military. So if the West is going to cut off Western Europe from natural gas, well, then they have to replace it. So then you go back to what General Wesley Clark was saying, because he talks about the 7 countries in 5 years. All right, the United States is already in Afghanistan, so you're really talking about 8 countries in 5 years. He lists them randomly. I'm going to list them in geographical order.
Mm-hmm.
Why? Because the United States needs to control. They need to resupply Germany. So they need to control the oil and gas fields and the overland logistical supply routes, because LNG is 30% more expensive. It is really expensive to liquefy the natural gas,
Yep.
ship it, and then regasify it.
Yep.
So in order to control that and put in geostrategic terms, they're controlling the maritime choke points, the riverine choke points, and the terrestrial choke points, because you need to control the land bridges. You need to control the land bridges because that's where the pipelines go.
Mm-hmm.
So GWAT has got, I know this is going to blow everybody's mind. GWAT, Global War on Terror, was nothing about spreading democracy.
Yes.
It was about taking over the oil fields and the land bridges to Europe to reroute the pipelines. If you reroute the pipelines, you reroute the profits. So that in the Middle East, they wanted to take over Lebanon, Syria, Iraq, Iran, and Afghanistan. They're already in Afghanistan. Tommy Franks was already there at the time. And then in Libya, what General Clark was saying in North Africa, Libya, Sudan, and Somalia. So Libya is connected to the Mediterranean with existing pipelines to Sicily and Italy. And then Sudan is connected to the Red Sea. And then in Somalia, it's at the point of the Gulf of, it's the Gulf of, it's the Strait of Bab el Mandab at the Gulf of Aden. So each one is connected to a certain river or a certain sea export area, and or a pipeline route. So people, again, I'm going to say it again and over again, you're controlling the maritime choke points, the riverine choke points, and the terrestrial choke points, because you're trying to control the oil and gas fields and the pipeline routes. So you need those land bridges. If people just look at a map, you can and just focus in on, don't focus in on anything. Just pull back a little bit so you get North Africa, the Arabian Peninsula, and then the South Caucasus. You can see what the land bridges are. You're trying to control the South Caucasus between the Caspian Sea and the Black Sea. Anatolia, Turkey controls that between the Caspian Sea, the Black Sea, and even the Adriatic Sea, or the sea where the Turkey, Greece, between Greece and Turkey. I'm sorry. And then in the Middle East, you're controlling the area between the Persian Gulf, the Eastern Mediterranean, and the Red Sea. So you're trying to control the land bridges on the Sinai going to Turkey, because the Bosphorus Straits and the Dardanelles, those are the big land bridges going to Europe. So if people look at, if people forget about the terrorist pretext of the West moving into that area and just think about controlling the land bridges by controlling the maritime, riverine, and terrestrial choke points, then everything starts to make sense.
Yes.
So
I mean, it does to me. I think you put it very well.
yeah,
And I'm glad I'm glad you changed the order of the countries that were intended to fall in 5 years. The situation, of course, now is different because, America was in Afghanistan for 20 years, and there were all kinds of publicly available documents to show what they were going to build, what their intentions were, and virtually nothing ever happened. None of it was done. But the Russians and the Chinese are in Afghanistan. The Americans hardly as far as I know, they didn't even do any strip mining. But the Russians and the Chinese have moved in to take advantage of that deal. What do you think about, like, is America content to let Central Asia, for now, because they left it? Biden's administration said that they had to leave in order to focus on Ukraine. Are they content? Like, are they going to use the Afghanistan version of ISIS to try to hemorrhage any kind of success that country has?
Let's go. Yeah, let's go towards what happened to Afghanistan and go to the black flags of the Khorasan angle now, because there's so many different angles on this. You already know. I mean, I can go on for weeks.
Yes.
So, because I spent so much time in this region, and then I'm watching. I use the Sean Ryan show as my sentiment analysis to do. There's a way to do frequency and content analysis, because he's got a bunch of notable people on his show. He's got a astounding show. I can see what the knowledge gaps are.
Right. You mean Ryan Dawson?
No, Sean Ryan.
Sean Ryan. Okay, sorry.
Yeah, I don't listen to Ryan Dawson that much.
Okay.
I don't get a chance. He was on. Who was he on with recently?
The guy from 21st Century News.
But he was on with Judge Napolitano. I saw him there.
Yes, he was. That's right.
Okay. See, he covers South Korea very well, but that's moving very slowly, because, again, it's about the Korean Peninsula pipeline. That's what the United States is trying to stop. Then the Koreans don't want, the Koreans don't want to be a vassal state of the United States. I mean, they were a vassal state of Japan during World War II. Then they became a vassal state of the United States. The supreme commander of the South Korean army is an American.
That's right.
They do not.
And just for young listeners, if you don't know, South Korea had a dictatorship up until 1989, so they didn't start having elections till about 35 years ago. So just in case people don't know that.
Oh yeah. Oh, that's okay. Yeah, I'm in my early 60s, so that's.
I remember. I'm in my late 50s, so you and I.
Oh, okay. So for the younger listeners, Felix even tries to stop me sometimes of, when I'm mentioning names of, past politicians or political leaders or, generals and cabinet level secretaries, and he's like, the 20-year-olds aren't gonna know who I'm talking about.
Yeah.
I mean, with me, since my father was a chief of staff to a congressman, I got to meet a lot of these people way back when I was in grade school, or I think I was in preschool or something. Wait, no, probably kindergarten or something when I went to Nixon's inauguration. So, I mean, okay. So, yeah, I got to meet a lot of these people, and I, still remember them, even though I was very, very young. So it means something to me, but it may not mean something to a Gen Z person or a millennial, okay?
Yeah.
So, all right. So they really don't want South Korea to have a Make Korea Great Again movement. Like Mike Benz is talking about, they really started the mass censorship as the United States was cutting off. Well, in that case, he was over in Eastern Europe when they started cutting off Europe from Russian natural gas. And then he noticed with the rise in the populist movements in Eastern Europe, because once you increase the price of energy is in everything. I always go back to what is economics. It's about taking raw materials out of the ground, whether it's mineral or agricultural, you turn them into a consumer product, and then you have to distribute it to stores to distribute it to the consumers. And every single little step of the way of those three big major schemas is energy. So if you increase the energy cost for every single movement in that process, that causes very significant inflation.
Right.
So in order to stop people noticing that inflation is increasing and their living standards are falling, you're going to get a fall in productivity, inflation, and then you're going to, out of those two things, you're going to get a decline in living standards. Well, then people start complaining about it. But when people start complaining about it, and it's a populist movement across the board, what Mike Benz is talking about is they started calling those people right-wing extremists.
Yes.
And they started the mass censorship. But this movement has moved from Eastern Europe to Central Europe to Western Europe to the UK and then finally to America. And he really makes, on his videos, and I urge everybody to watch some of Mike Benz's videos. They're very, very good. And he was on the Sean Ryan show.
Oh, okay.
But yeah, he makes a very good series of correlations in that. And then with the Sean Ryan show, he gets about 2.5 hours into it. And then he's stumped about the role of natural gas in geopolitics. I think somebody sent him my slide sets because now he's totally, all of a sudden he's got the epiphany. So, it's they're trying to stop Russian natural gas because it leads to the global realignment. It completely undoes the George Kennan's 5 power center doctrine is what that does.
Right. Just as an aside, do you know what Alistair Crook calls George Cannon?
No, I love
on Judge Napolitano's show. He calls him George Cannon. I'm sorry, I heard him pronounce it like that this week. I just find it very funny. I don't want to keep going, George. I don't want to derail you. This is excellent.
Alistair Crook, I've been following him since, I want to say, at least 2014, maybe before.
Oh, wow.
No, at least. No, wait, hold on a second. 20 was in Kabul. Either late 2013 or early 2014. 2014, that's fine. Yeah. But he was writing in Huffington Post, of all places.
Really?
And and everybody should go back and read everything he wrote, even though it's really time consuming, back in, from 2011 to 2015 or 16. And because what he wrote back then concerning the role of ISIS in the Middle East is just as pertinent then as it is now. In fact, it's more pertinent now than then because, and let's get into the black flags of the Khorasan.
Yes, let's do that. Let's do that.
Right.
There's lots of videos on the internet about this if people want to type it in.
Yeah,
Okay, and then you're free to share your screen whenever you're ready.
with my old Matt Bracken videos, I was talking about the Sunni versus Shia strat plan. And this is very important and it's going to take some time. But if people start to understand what I'm about to talk about, then more things will start to make sense and fall into place. If people can Google a map of the Sunni versus Shia split, I should have brought one up, but I don't. What's occurred once you had the Tehran revolution in 78 going into 79, the Shia revolution. Well, what that meant was they had a theocracy where the Shia imams elected a Shia supreme leader. The significance of that is after Muhammad died, the first four caliphs were elected by the imams that were in that inner circle, and they elected their new leader, their new caliph. So that set the precedent that's the way, in the Sunnah and Hadith, that's the precedent that Islam is supposed to follow. What does that mean? It means that all family dynasties are illegitimate in the eyes of Islam, and all Western forms of government, as discussed by Plato and Aristotle, are also illegitimate. So democracy to them is an illegitimate form of government. So what does the United States try to do to the West in the Islamic countries during GWAT? They try to bring about democracy, which is a completely illegitimate form of government. Mm-hmm. That's important because after the Shia revolution, and then in 79, the Sunnis, the Sunni Salafist Wahhabis in Saudi Arabia got very upset. Now they want a theocracy, a caliph, to then oust the House of Saud. So that's what that Salafi Wahhabi movement was about during the 70s. And then they had it culminated in the Grand Mosque seizure, which again, everybody needs to Google Grand Mosque seizure 1979 and read as much as they can about that and watch videos about that. Yes, it was crushed, but the House of Saud brought in the Pakistani military and French special forces to do it, which further angered the Wahhabis. But when it was crushed, the House of Saud, executed, the non-clerics, but they couldn't execute the clerics because that would make people upset. So they struck a deal that they would start massively funding the Wahhabist mosques all over the world. That's why people see all these, mosques, multi-million-dollar mosques everywhere. Because basically the House of Saud they're trying to keep Al-Qaeda and ISIS from overthrowing them in Afghanistan. And Alistair Cook has done several articles on that topic, that the real aim of ISIS is to overthrow the House of Saud, and Saudi Arabia is a powder keg. I could go on and on about that.
I think you're absolutely right about that, because before we began recording the show, I was talking about how there is this kind of from my perspective as a European Orthodox Christian, I look at the Shia and the Sunnis, and there is like amongst the Sunnis a kind of there's a kind of hypocrisy and a kind of stupidity. Like, frankly, I'm sorry, but like these guys were just not strong enough to fight the Israelis to save the Palestinians. But if you watch these Khorasan videos about, we're going to take Al-Quds, we're going to take the Al-Aqsa Mosque. That's what the Quds means. They're Jerusalem. We're going to do all that. We're going to save the Palestinians, right? Like, you're going to do that, right? But yes, I know there are excuses, but we have to destroy Syria first so we get a safe passage. I mean, the fact is they could have gone in from various different angles, even if they wanted to stick to the prophecy, to move from Lebanon and go down. Like, they could have joined them, like, we know Hamas fought against Hezbollah in Syria when there was still a Syria, but, they did end up, I wouldn't say working together, but not fighting each other, in order for the sake of the Palestinians. And, like, let's look at Osama bin Laden, right? Osama bin Laden essentially wanted to do what the Iranians already did decades before. So he thought, well, you know what? Of course, the Khorasan prophecy, right? I sent some screen caps from one of those videos, George, and you can see where the region that I'm talking about. So of course he believed it. But the fact of the matter is, there was actually a Muslim country that kicked out the British, that kicked out the Americans, and it kicked out, like, basically negative Jewish influence, working within the country, and that was Iran, right? So this is what I mean about this is what I mean about there's a kind of envy there. It's not conscious. It's not well articulated. I'll give you another example. So this week, there's a reporter in Gaza. He's a Palestinian. He's lost huge amounts of his family in the bombing. Well, he now blames Hezbollah for this, not Hamas. Hezbollah. The Shias did this. It was a trick. No, they didn't. I mean, no. Hamas is a part of the Muslim Brotherhood. Erdogan, the guy who's taken over northern Syria and Aleppo, that's the guy, right? Like, so they get everything completely wrong. Since they can't topple their governments, since they can't fight Israel, they decide, well, we're going to just have to clean up the Shia. That's what we got to do. And U.S. intelligence and British and Israeli intelligence sources are just as aware of these prophecies as they are, and they always know how to manipulate them. And yeah, so that's kind of like what I have to say about this, right? Like, they hate the fact that they live in countries where their ruling elites don't want. I mean, Syria was literally the last Arab Muslim country that did not recognize Israel, that did not have dialogue with the Zionist state. That's the one they destroyed. But they're going to fix this all around. You just got to give them time. You just got to give them time. It reminds me of the situation in Eastern Europe. Oh, I really hate all these negative influences. It's the same culprits in the Middle East as in Eastern Europe. But we just have to destroy Russia first, then we'll do it. Right? It's always this kind of nonsense. And for me, that's an enormous parallel.
Yeah, I want to go a couple. Let me continue the systematic discussion, because I set that up before, because the Shia had their strategic plans to be the Shia Crescent and connect with the Shia areas, which the Alawite Shia in Lebanon and in Syria, and then also the Shia in Yemen, and even in Jeddah area of Saudi Arabia, and then the whole on the Persian Gulf side of Saudi Arabia. So you're talking about south of Baghdad in Iraq, Kuwait, the eastern side of Saudi Arabia, Qatar, and Bahrain. Well, you have Shia majorities there. Yes. So Iran has been saying, we want to have democracy, because they know that these Sunni governments will fall if you have democratic elections, and then the family dynasties will go away. Yep. So the GCC countries have always been against having elections. And then the Iranians have always been saying, hey, how come the United States is propping up these family dynasty dictators? And they're exactly right. So what the focus of the people from this Arabian, the Sunnis, was to completely encircle Iran after 1979. So they started funding the Pashtun in Pakistan and Afghanistan under Zia al-Haq. He killed Bhutto in 1977, and then he died in the plane crash in 1988. For those people that don't know, he was an Islamist, and he took power in of the Pakistan army, which is interesting because, just off on a little aside, he's an Islamist and a one-man ruler who is supported by the imams. So, and actually, he's a caliph, when you look at it in those terms. So he was trying to Islamize Pakistan and Afghanistan. Okay, the purpose was he was against the atheist communist governments in the Central Asian stands, and wanted to retake them and make them Islamic again. So that was the purpose of training the Mujahideen and then getting them to resist Soviets, not just in Afghanistan, but before that it was, well, nowadays you call it the Uzbekistan Islamic movement, the Kyrgyzstan Islamic movement, the East Turkestan movement in Xinjiang with the Uyghurs, and you have a Tajikistan Islamic movement as well. That's where these groups formed in the late 70s. It was Zbigniew Brzezinski and Stansfield Turner. Let me stop there for a second, because Zbigniew Brzezinski went to Harvard Kennedy School and took the Yale Grand Strategies classes during the summer when Henry Kissinger was there, and also Klaus Schwab was there before that. Well, before, during, and after. He never left. And then John Lewis Gaddis and Hill and Paul Kennedy being from the Kennedy School, would also teach at the Naval War College in Newport. So these people go back and forth and take these classes. So when Zbigniew Brzezinski, being the national security advisor for Carter, and Stansfield Turner being the director for Central Intelligence, when they were running the Carter government and making policy, they started massively funding the Mujahideen with General Zia al-Haq and the Wahhabist movement to take advantage of that. And there's, back then they called it Operation Cyclone. Very, very important. People should Google that, watch videos on that. And the different Zbigniew Brzezinski videos that he did during GWAT, he was pressed back when you had journalists that actually were curious. He was pressed on whether that was a good call. The whole Charlie Wilson war, the more you read about what I just said, the Grand Mosque movement and Operation Cyclone, the more you realize what propaganda Charlie Wilson's war was. It becomes really stupid and laughable. So he was pressed on that and said, well, at the time, and he makes very, very good comments. He says what the weapons and training that the British, SAS provided and the American Special Forces provided to the Pashtun and the other northern ethnic groups, Uzbeks and Tajiks. Mm-hmm. What he was saying was the amount of assistance we gave was dwarfed by what was coming from the Arab oil sheiks on the Arabian Peninsula. Not just Saudi Arabia, but Qatar, Bahrain, and the UAE.
Yes.
And that's very important for people to know. But on the other hand, our special forces guys providing them training was key, because then the Pashtun, and you also have the Akani Network and a whole bunch of other groups. The Pashtun are going to be in the Waziristans and Pakhtun Khyber KPK what they now, but the other Tajikistan and Islamic movement and Islamic movement of Uzbekistan, Tajikistan, and Kyrgyzstan, and the East Turkestan movement and the Uyghurs were training up in Dur in the northern end of the Sulayman Mountains. So this all started during Operation Cyclone. Well, when GWAT happened, the United States, I classify that period of from Zbigniew Brzezinski to the end of the Cold War and beginning of global war on terror. I call that a regime change destabilization strategy. Then with GWAT, they wanted to do the regime change, democratic nation building era. And then, of course, that collapsed. Again, what countries are taking over? They're taking over, the riverine, maritime, and terrestrial choke points to take over the land bridges. In North America and in the Middle East, the countries that General Wesley Clark listed. So ever since then, the Sunnis have been trying to encircle the Shia. The Shia have been trying to do a breakout strategy with their Shia crescent, but that's occurring when the United States or the Anglosphere, the sea powers, are using the Speakman or the Mackinder-Speakman doctrine to encircle and contain Eurasia, to contain the heartland, and then the heartland is trying to break out of that encirclement. So you have a series of encirclement and breakout maneuvers. And now, since the United States and, Israel mostly, has been let me back up a second. When the Shia control southern Lebanon and southern Syria, at that point, Iran has control of western Khorasan and controls the area north of Israel, and they were building up and getting ready to attack Israel to bring back the Mahdi in a Shia form, to prove that the Shia are the chosen people.
Right.
Okay, meanwhile, this is a whole Ismail versus Isaac fight, for the theology aspect of it. Now, technically, the Persians cannot, the Messiah cannot come through the Persians. It's got to be a Jew or an Arab. It has to be a descendant of Abraham. Then he had three wives, Sarah, Hagar, or actually Hagar first, and then Sarah, and then Keturah. So it's technically only supposed to come from Sarah or Hagar, depending on whether you're an Arab or a Jew. But genetically, you can't prove that. You could only do that with DNA testing, and it would be hard to differentiate that. So I just say all three of Abraham's wives. So this whole conflict is to see who the chosen people are.
Right.
So the Shias were in the lead when they controlled Hezbollah, and they were stockpiling missiles there. They're doing all of that. But the Sunnis feel like they're behind, and they're trying to catch up.
This is what I'm getting at. I'm so glad you're giving all the important details, but just from observation, this is what I've noticed.
Yeah. Oh, okay. Yeah. All right. So, let me get back to it. So there's this struggle to who can control southern Lebanon first. So the Shia are in the lead. So right now, the present threat for Israel is to dislodge the Shia out of southern Syria. But then that's on the regional strategic level. On the global grand strategic level, the superpowers are fighting the natural gas wars. So you have different levels of conflict between your local, regional, and global grand strategic levels of geopolitical strategies. So that's why I go systematically one level to another. To get people to think about this strategically, because if you can think about it in terms of, strategic models or rational actor belief preference constraint models, rational choice models, Of course, I put them into, military decision-making process of, course of action assessment, development, and selection. So all of these methodologies are occurring. That's what's in my slide sets. That's why they take so long to do. But so the Israelis have beat back the first threat. Meanwhile, the Anglosphere with the sea power doctrine are more concerned with getting natural gas pipelines to Europe and closing down Russia. So now they're using, they've always used the Sunni violent extremist organizations, the Sunni VEOs, to take over these areas.
Yep.
And then that's how the Mujahideen became the Sunni Pashtun Taliban. That's how ISIS and Al-Qaeda formed. They form on their own. And then what the superpowers do, proxy wars and irregular warfare is when outside actors antagonize a fight between people along ethnic, religious, and linguistic lines. Mm-hmm. And I stress those three things because when you start to see how the great powers and superpowers, when they want to generate a proxy war or a color revolution or irregular warfare, anything, or insurgency, counterinsurgency doctrines, those things are very, very similar concepts. So I break it down to ethnic, religious, and linguistic lines. All those things have that in common. So here in this case, they used the let me put it this way. In 2011, Al-Qaeda in Iraq was pretty much dead, but somehow they reemerged.
Yep.
And they took over Syria, and all of a sudden they're renamed, Jabhat al-Nusra, al-Nusra Front, or Al-Qaeda in Iraq became Islamic State in the Levant, ISIL. Then it became the Islamic State in Syria, ISIS, and then it became IS. All of these groups somehow emerged, but every time they reemerge, they change the names to rebrand. So when the Western powers that be want to make them worthy victims, in manufacturing consent, they rename them, and then when they want to beat them back, then they rename them and call them terrorists, to beat them back in a certain way.
Yeah.
And during different times period, you see this. So then on Nusra Front, they wanted to beat back the Shia again out of southern Syria, southern Iraq. So then they named it Hot Tahrir al-Sham, because now they have to become worthy adversaries.
That's right. It was the same people, same organization.
Same people.
And the funny thing is Israel is like bombing and taking over village after village in southern Syria now. And it's amazing how their bombing campaign has not killed any civilians, but they couldn't manage to do that when they were bombing Syria when Assad was in power. It's really incredible how that happened.
Oh, right. So, so the neocons want their gas pipelines to go through.
Yep.
Erdogan can immediately get, so you're looking at the Levantine oil and gas fields off the coast of Gaza that go all the way up to Beirut. So you need to get a pipeline that goes along the coast to get it to Turkey. So Turkey wants to become a big, huge energy hub. They can also immediately extract the oil and gas fields in eastern Syria, that's in Kurdish territory. They can also immediately do that. The Qatar pipeline would take 5 years at the soonest, or maybe 10 years. So that's a long shot. So if you look at pipelines, they can do that. But if you're going to use that as your rational actor, but then these different groups, they're motivated more by religious ideology. Ideology ideology is some ideal end state.
Right.
And in this case, the ideal end state is for the Sunnis to attack Israel for the north. And the reason why I bring up I brought up this black flag video of the Khorasan because it's 10 years old.
Mm-hmm.
I posted these things before I left Afghanistan in 2021. And now the big focus in these things was, how are the Sunnis going to move out of, let me back up a second. The Shia are in West Khorasan in Iran. People can look up Khorasan province, Iran. You got a map? Do you have a map? Anyway, people can look that up. And then the rest of Afghanistan and southern Turkmenistan, Uzbekistan, and Tajikistan, and Afghanistan is all Eastern Khorasan. So they need to first take over, to fill the prophecies of the Hadith, take over West Khorasan, the Sunnis. But then the next, so they've done that. And that they've been doing that ever since 1979, which is why I want people to know about the Grand Mosque seizure. And then Brzezinski and Turner actually helped them do that. Mm-hmm. Then during Biwat, we beat the Taliban back, and then they came back into power. So now they feel really emboldened. So they were saying that they're going to, when the Americans leave, we're going to take them back. We left. They took back Afghanistan. So then the next thing was, now they have to figure out a way to go through Iran and then dislodge Hezbollah in southern Lebanon and southern Syria. Well, their prophecy was, or what they were saying in these videos is, Rome, meaning the West, is going to make it possible. They're going to say, the Islamists, the Wahhabi Islamists have to be faithful because Rome, due to their greed, is going to create a path. Well, between the different perspectives of the neocons wanting the oil and gas pipelines to feed Germany, Turkey wanting to become a gas hub, and Erdogan is also very religiously motivated. They've dislodged Hezbollah out of southern Syria and southern Lebanon, and now the Sunnis control it. So here's the kicker. The neocons think that they can control this Frankenstein's monster by cutting off their ammo. But what if Turkey, so that's why they're bombing all these army depots, because now they realize
right
that
they don't want any of this military hardware getting in the hands of the jihadists.
Right, because now
whether it's HTS or SNA, they can't have it.
Yeah, you call it by whatever its name. I just call it the Sunni violent extremist organizations, so it doesn't confuse people. Yep. Because the powers that be keep on changing the names to confuse people.
You're right.
So just call it the Sunni, BEOs, and it just call it that and keep it straight. So now these different Sunni groups, the fundamentalists, are now going to be cheering the fact that Rome paved the way for them to attack Israel from the north. And Israel knows this. They know this because, these prophecies are well known, for people that study theology. Yep. I read the Bible several times and talked to people about theology all over the Middle East. So it's well known in those circles, but 5 feet outside those circles, not known at all, especially in America.
Right.
So this is gonna boost the Sunni fundamentalists all across the region. They're gonna be energized. This is like a pep rally for them now. So they're gonna try to rearm and attack Israel, and the United States is trying to stop it. But now, Putin knows this too. And the Iranians know this, and the Chinese know this too. Mm-hmm. Well, if you look at the number of views I get on Energy Newsbeat, yes, there's a lot of, the only people that listen to me are other analysts.
Right.
There's analysts across Eastern Europe and Russia and China. I have as many views from there, according to Stuart, as I do for any other place.
Right.
So within the intelligence communities, this is why, they're the people that listen to me, that and financial people.
Right. If I could just mention one thing, George, I want to hear your take on it. It's still very early, right?
Yeah.
But so far, the Russian Air Force and naval bases in the Latakia region of western Syria that has, of course, beaches of the Mediterranean and so on.
Yeah.
They're still there. They recognize the Sunni violent extremists now, and the Sunni violent extremists, of course, recognize them.
Right.
I honestly, last week I thought like the Russians will have to leave because, like, let's say Assad didn't fall. Let's say this attack, which by all rights, everyone was surprised how quickly it happened. Even Erdogan in the U.S. thought it would take much longer. Okay.
Yeah.
And everybody knows now that Assad was warned by the Russians, by the Iranians, 2 months before it happened, and again 2 weeks before it happened. Assad has made some really crazy decisions. Back in 2018, when most of this fighting was all wrapped up, and you just had to worry about ISIS here and there. There was that push that they pushed the Islamists further into Idlib, away from Aleppo, that happened in 2019, and Erdogan started crying and so on, and it stopped. Okay. Around late 2018, because I remember that's around the time we started doing the show, the Russians offered Assad to retrain everybody to new kits, not just new uniforms, but just better kit. And he said no, which I thought, one of the things I thought of in retrospect, I didn't understand it then, but in retrospect, because you speak to other Middle Eastern people, and in a way, they don't like Europeans being there. They're extremely territorial. And by all indications that we were slowly starting to learn, Assad really wanted to appeal to the Arab League. He really wanted, and he was told that they were going to lift the sanctions. He really fell for it. And anyways, but what I wanted to say was, what do you think is, because of course the Russians may leave, because if Assad didn't fall, who were Russia's allies in the Middle East? There aren't any. There aren't any. There, literally, it was Syria, and that's it. I mean, Iran, yes, you could say Iran, but Iran is quite a distance. Iran is partly a Middle Eastern country and partly a Central Asian country, to be perfectly fair.
With the geography you'd be looking at when it comes to Eastern Mediterranean, the coastline, the Levant, it is just Syria. Jordanian's completely under the control of the Americans. Israel, who are we kidding? Egypt is a little bit up in the air, but that might be a little too far west for what we're talking about. But yeah, you're completely correct.
There's nobody there, especially after the start of the SMO. The Americans have created this moral panic about talking to Russia about anything, right? They've recreated this incredible boogeyman that is going to take over. I'm just saying, in the Levant and in the entirety of the Mediterranean, Russia doesn't have any allies there.
And on that note, look at, since 2022, the amount of quote-unquote Russian influence that has been purged in Cyprus, which was once on very good terms with Russia, had a lot of Russian money in it, and that's completely gone. That's
and that happened again before Assad. Before Assad being deposed. So what's your take on that? This interesting development of Sunni violent extremists recognizing Russia, Russia recognizing them. So far, it's very early. What do you think? Is that going to continue?
I already know what it is. Yeah, okay. I already know what it is. Okay, I think History Legends. That guy did a very good video the other day.
Yep.
He explained. He explained the movements, and he said the reason why it fell so fast. He said bribery and corruption, bribery. The corruption over there. The general. It doesn't matter which Arabic country or Islamic country, really, for that matter. The officers always demand that their troops pay them. Their troops ended up only getting about $40 a month. So there's no
Well, the
morale.
generals got $40 a month, but the troops were paid, depending on the rank, between $7 to $12. Like the average jihadi was paid over 100 times more than a general in
Oh,
the.
okay.
Yeah, yeah. Now there
Right.
is a. Again, I'm going to keep this very brief. There's a YouTube channel called. It's all one word. NCF Peace. NCF is capital and then peace is lowercase. Interesting
Okay.
channel. He seems to be. He has a British accent, but I don't think he's British. He may be Syrian. He was in communication with a general of the 4th Division of the Syrian army from the time that the hostilities broke out, and he is confirming essentially everything that History Legend was saying. There was jamming, very bad jamming, the first day, night vision goggles, all of that, but and the drones. But the thing that surprised me the most was Aleppo. Like, drones are not that effective in urban environments. The Russians did bomb, but the Russians also only have between 6 to 7 jets. These are not like big strategic bombers.
Yeah.
These are
Let
like
me.
Su-34s and about 10 helicopters. So it's not a big force. Anyways,
Yeah. Let me get
what's
back to this because I need to.
yeah,
I need to.
yeah.
I need to make,
That's it for now.
I need to make a very important point because okay, lack of pay. The soldiers walked off just like the way the Afghan army broke
Yep.
apart. Same thing when I was there in Baghdad. Same thing. So yeah, it's a recurring phenomenon I see. So
Libya
then
too.
the other one was bribery because History Legends was saying for some unknown reason the armies got shifted out of Aleppo.
Yes,
Okay, to
including the
down south.
Tiger forces.
All right. So he goes over that. And then, but I want to add a couple more things
Okay,
because
go ahead.
the U.S. Special Forces and the Kurds, the YPG, have the Euphrates River Valley and that whole northeastern part of Syria where the oil and gas fields are. So they're controlling. They're stopping Syria from taking its production of oil and gas and selling it for wealth to then build their military up the same way the United States is trying to stop Russia from selling its gas east, oil and gas, west into Europe. So the United States is took over the oil fields to deprive Bashar Assad income to pay his army. The fourth thing is they also control the agricultural areas, which is depriving the Syrians or the ability of the Assad government to feed its people. So bribery, corruption, cutting off the oil fields for income and starving them at the same time. So Bashar Assad and Putin must have recognized, hey, this situation is long-term untenable.
Yeah.
So let's go ahead and get out because people think, some of those shows I watched, I think it was History Legends, was thinking that, well, maybe they just thought HTS was just going to take over Aleppo and Hama. And Hama. Let me put up the map up here so people can see what I'm talking about. And then they would probably be stopped at Homs. Well, that didn't happen. It looks like they did a screen pass, for those American audience that know the football play where you let the line in. It seems like they went ahead and just abdicated and said, to hell with it. We're just going to let the Sunnis take over.
Yeah.
And then that's going to surprise Turkey and Israel that their plan is overly successful. Okay,
Right.
I need to go. Why would they do that? Well, it's because if they do that, well, then the West thinks that they can control this group by not giving them any more ammo.
Mm-hmm.
But what happens if the Russians and Chinese
Exactly.
start bringing in boatloads of ammo and resupply them, then you
What
have
what
Russia.
what if the Russians and the Chinese returned the favor to the Americans and the
Yeah,
Israelis?
right. That's what I wrote in Joaquin. I wrote that in Joaquin Flores's post today, and then I sent that over to you earlier
Yep.
in my discussions with Felix, because yeah, that's what they've done. And this whole the West had planned this invasion, and it was written about that. History Legends talks about it was written about in Al Jazeera. I was watching Richard Medhurst. Is that his name?
Yep. It is.
Okay. So he was talking about the New York. Wait, was it the New York Times? Even published an article on that over the summer. So it was widely known.
Mm-hmm.
And and then on Redacted they had an LA Times article on that topic. So it's widely known. And then Assad happened. So what happened? Well, Assad just said to hell with it and went into retirement.
Yeah.
All right. He's going to be like, okay, be careful what you wish for.
Yeah.
Okay. They wanted, the West, Erdogan and Israel wanted Assad gone. So now he's left. Just like the neocons wanted Saddam Hussein gone.
Mm-hmm.
And then that was the bulwark between the Shia and the Sunni Islamists. You took him away. The two just went at it. Well, now you just took Bashar Assad away. It's going to have the same effect.
Right.
Same thing with.
So you could argue that
Gaddafi.
if this is an attempt to overextend Russia, it may overextend the West
So
because they need those pipelines. And if Syria doesn't calm down to some degree, those pipelines aren't going to get built, especially the gas pipeline from Qatar, which is meant to offset the Iranian pipeline. Neither of them have been built, but that was the reason even for this war, because in 2011, Assad said no.
All right, I want to go two more directions with that, because when they left Afghanistan, the United States went back. They went back to Operation Cyclone and went back to a regime change destabilization strategy.
Mm-hmm.
So all these Sunni VEOs in Central Asia would then start attacking Russian and Chinese infrastructural projects. We'll talk about that another day. But then, so what did Russia do? Well, they returned the favor again, because now they gave the West what they want. Assad is gone, but now Al-Qaeda is now in charge of Damascus. Al-Qaeda now runs a nation state, and I'm not the only one saying that. YouTube is blowing up with people saying that. So it's the Western legacy media that talks about that these are freedom rebels, and we'll get to that.
We'll see. Like, it's going to be very interesting to see. Okay, if we compare Syria to Libya, because Libya is a country forgotten. I'm very sure that the West wants Syria to be forgotten. But if what you're saying about this whole black flags of Khorasan and so on, if what you're saying is true, then because the activities are so close, right next to Israel, right? It can't be forgotten the way Libya is forgotten, the way Afghanistan and Iraq are forgotten. It's just too close to the most sensitive. Because, of course, America's number one concern is Israel.
Right. So all the Russians have to do, what I think that they did, was they went ahead and had Assad and his family abdicate, because Assad's family already was in Russia. So he abdicated. Now all they have to do is bring in boatloads of ammo to Latakia and Tartus and resupply HTS from all the, replace all the ammunition and military assets that the United States and Israel is trying to blow up as much as they can. If they come back and replace it, well, now what they're going to do is try to arm the hell out of HTS, so they'll attack Israel from the north to fulfill the end times prophecies. They're just going to return the favor of what the United States did in central when we left Afghanistan on purpose. And again, I got to focus on this. I'm going to emphasize that because as much as I watch the Sean Ryan show, it doesn't matter which guest it is. It doesn't matter what level in the military they are, or even like Tulsi Gabbard or Lieutenant Colonel Scott Mann. Oh, Sarah Adams was on recently. I think that show aired today, and she's a great, counterterrorism analyst. But they all get stuck. They don't realize that when we departed from Afghanistan, we went back to Operation Cyclone of a regime change destabilization period. Okay, yes. On our Telegram channel that you were in, it shifted over to the private one. What we were talking about last year was the goal is to arm the different terrorist groups to blow up Russian and Chinese pipelines. Caspian Sea Report.
Yep.
Caspian Report did a show recently showing American goods in Sistan, Baluchistan, Iran. So the neocon plan is to arm the different ethnic minorities inside Iran to destabilize Iran.
Yes.
But again, when they do that, they're going to compound the problem that they have in Syria, because now they're going to put the Sunni BEOs in charge of those countries. So then the black flag Khorasan videos can be completely operationalized by the neocon strategies.
Do you think, Saudi Arabia, for instance, is working towards becoming a BRICS member, right? Even Turkey is interested in it, right? Iran already is. Yeah. Do you think, the elites of these countries have to be thinking, none of this is going to happen? They're thinking for their own survival, as much as Erdogan is religiously motivated, right? Erdogan is not going to he knows he cannot go to war with Israel, and he's not going to do it. He might take over Damascus in a kind of de jure way instead of a de facto way. You know what I mean? It can be a sphere of influence, kind of like Azerbaijan, but everybody pretends it's a separate country, but it's still not incorporated in Turkey.
Right. Well,
but he's not going to go. He's not going to go against, and neither are the Saudis, right? I guess what I'm saying is these regimes are also afraid of these guys, right? And I think this is brilliant what you're pointing out, and so much has changed in the last week. Go ahead, George. Keep going.
I know I've been way ahead of everybody.
Yeah.
Which the powers that be know that too. But when I watched, because I got some attention from that particular 4-star. So anyway, by accident, that's a long story. But what again, I go back to the Sean Ryan show because he's got notable people on it, and they just can't figure out the whole Afghanistan withdrawal, and they did it on purpose. And again, I'm going to say this another time. It's back to Operation Cyclone. Yeah. The era of regime change, nation building stopped. The neocons went back to regime change destabilization. I peg regime change destabilization was from Brzezinski in the late 70s to the global war on terror. And then we can go from global war on terror till the Afghanistan withdrawal. But then and then they went back to regime change destabilization. But then you have to say, well, since no part of the GWAT regime change nation building program worked, since no part of that worked, it was really regime change destabilization the whole time. Me and some of the people on Telegram channel, I put it in those three distinct periods because it gives people a framework of analysis to then start analyzing each period, to get a better understanding of when the policy changed. Well, since it failed, it was regime change destabilization the whole time. But I'm talking about, the difference between intentions and motives. The motive was for GWAT to be regime change nation building, which failed spectacularly. Why did it fail? I go back to the only legitimate form of government in Islam is a caliphate, so it just doesn't take hold there.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So
and also, the Americans never built anything. I mean, it's sort of completely different than what they were doing in
right.
After World War II and some of the other theaters of war that America was involved in after World War II. Like they don't even bother. Just take a look at like Libya, Iraq, Afghanistan. There's nothing built. I mean, one of every three infrastructures in Afghanistan was built by the Soviets.
Yeah, I want to hit that topic because that's a huge topic. Eric Prince talked about it. I read some of his articles before I left Afghanistan. It was a long time ago. I did a parallel series of papers on that on my LinkedIn page. And I've been talking about this next to forever because when, it's since the old Soviet infrastructure, the railway system is all up north. It was best if the United States, that the Silk Road project was when the Chinese did their overland logistical supply routes because they're trying to get its overland logistical supply routes versus the sea power maritime choke point strategies. So the first thing that China did was try to rebuild and upgrade the old Soviet railway system, and then build the pipelines to Turkmenistan, Uzbekistan, Kazakhstan, Kyrgyzstan, and Tajikistan. All the stands, and then try to get the pipelines into Tehran, so that way both Tehran could break free of U.S. sanctions as well as China. Mm-hmm. And then China was trying to avoid, the Malacca Strait dilemma.
Right.
And there's a lot of great videos on that. So, and then that was the Silk Road. The Belt and Road Initiative is then to extend the Silk Road infrastructure to the Persian Gulf. I'll bring it up here on the map on the screen share here, by building a port in Chabahar Port, and also in Gwadar Port. Chabahar Port, for the people that are listening and not watching, is in the Gulf of Oman, in Sistan, Baluchistan, Iran, and then Gwadar Port is in the Baluchistan part of Pakistan. That used to be, the Baluch used to be part of the Durrani Empire with the Pashtun in Afghanistan before Durand built the Durand line that separated Afghanistan and Pakistan in he did that in 1921, but then when the British left the Raj, it became not just a government's boundary, it became a national boundary, but it split up the Baluch and the Pashtun. It cut their tribes right in half. Sarah Adams was on the Sean Ryan show, and Sean Ryan was saying he was the first person to break the story that the pallets of cash were landing in Kabul. Well, no, that's not true. Lynn O'Donnell of Foreign Policy was, and she disclosed that on WION. And in our communications, I posted those videos on the Telegram channel that I used to run. So that was done. That would have been the winter of 2022 is when she did that. But I knew that before in close communications, because my former Afghan local national co-workers were still in Afghanistan, and they were telling me that that was happening. So I knew it the whole time.
Incredible.
All right, so they act like they first are the first. Okay, yeah, they are the first person on a major media platform to discuss it. That Wyon show that was okay. Wyon is One American News out of New Delhi. Yeah, Americans don't watch that. I mean, I watch it because my local guard force speaks Urdu and Indian language. So that kind of knowledge is big over there, but not over here. So, yeah, I knew that, but then they're confused. Lynn O'Donnell was saying, okay, the money is going over, it's supposed to go to the, to the NGOs so they can buy food for the people. And Lynn O'Donnell was saying only half it, makes it there. Well, and I even emailed her this. I even just told her that most of that money is going to these Sunni VEOs to destabilize and blow up Russian and Chinese infrastructure. And then, okay, that was a couple of years ago now that I knew that, or I just made a wild guess that this was done on purpose. Once you start to catch the pattern, because Sarah Adams, who's a great, counterterrorism analyst, and Sean Ryan, who's a tier 2 SEAL operator, they don't get the connection that it's going back to Operation Cyclone, and these Sunni VEOs are funded on purpose to destabilize Iran now. So they're going to destabilize Iraq already, and then Syria, and before that it was Libya. Well, now they're going to destabilize Iran.
Right. Well, what do you think of this? Western elites, America, Israel, they would like to destroy Iran, right? But Lebanon, you cannot risk if the jihadis really start getting angry at Israel, like for instance today, the Druze in southern Syria today met with the Israelis and said they want to be part of the same country. So the Druze community, okay, so let's see how long the Salafists, Wahhabis, whatever they are, let's see how long they tolerate this. Because if they stop tolerating it, it will be in the Israelis' interest not to destroy Lebanon. Because if they do, then the Sunni violent extremists will have access to shelling northern Israel. But you would want Iran destroyed. So you would only want one part of the prophecy fulfilled and the other not.
So then you have, let me finish Iran, because if they destabilize Iran, then the Sunni VEOs take it over. So again, they've accomplished everything that the Black Flags of the Khorasan videos, we're hoping that would happen. So it's the neocons are going to pat themselves in the back for funding the Sunni VEOs to destabilize Iran, thinking that they're going to reroute the natural gas pipelines south of the Caspian, and then either through Armenia or through Turkey or both. All right. Now let's go. Let me move the map over from that area so people know where it is, back over to Lebanon, because I've been talking to my friend Iba in Beirut a lot lately. And I wrote a very long, a 13 or 14 page paper on Beirut last end of August. I was actually had left. Whatever. I was in the region and I actually went to Thailand for a week and a half and wrote a long paper up there and sent it, because see now the Sunnis are surrounding Lebanon. They can get resupplied by the Russians and Chinese, because you're going to have the Sunnis are going to be are going to control Iran. They're going to, Iran's going to be destabilized. The Sunni areas in Iraq will get funded or supported. Libya is already destabilized permanently. All these countries are going to be just a mess. So if Russia supplies TARDIS, if Russia supplies HTS out of TARDIS and Latakia, well, Lebanon is now surrounded. So now the Israelis are going to have to make a counter movement. So moving up to the Druze area in what is it, Suwada, into that area, that gives Israel a pretext to move out another couple hundred kilometers and fulfill their greater Israel, their greater Israel project. If people aren't familiar with what I'm talking about, Google Theodore Herzl. That's Herzl, Herzl.
I have a map. I'm going to send it to you.
Okay. And Oded Yinon and their greater Israel plan. I sent you guys a map of that earlier. All right. So you have, the greater Israel plan, the Zionist plan was done by Theodore Herzl. Again, he's another grand strategist, but this time a Zionist grand strategist. So I'm going to take a wild guess and say he had been reading Mackinder, Ratzel, and Haushofer. He moved to Basel, so he's dealing with the big finance people. Oded Yinon also created this plan where they want to take back the promised land, and for them the promised land is from the Nile River to the Euphrates River, the Al Farat in Arabic.
Mm-hmm.
So by moving into Syria and by forming a tie with the Druze, it gives them an excuse to take over, a very convenient excuse to take over more territory in Syria. Let me go back to my other map.
I mean, the amount of territory is extraordinary. Like, they would take 20% of Egypt, half of Iraq, all of Jordan. They would take at least 20 to 25% of Saudi Arabia, 2/3 of Syria, and they would even take about 5% from Turkey, just to realize this plan.
Oh, right. So what they can do right now, because it's an incremental plan, right?
That's right. Right.
Okay. So right now they can take over up to Suwade, but since so much of this region is desert that nobody lives in,
Mm-hmm.
I mean, when I fly over this region back at night, back and forth, you're going to be like, well, what can you tell by flying back and forth at night? Well, you can tell where there are not lights. You can tell where there are not lights. Everything is completely pitch black. And out of the pitch blackness, every now and then you will see a gas flare at an oil field. That's what you can tell overnight. So if they take up to Asuwada, then the rest is mostly desert. They can actually push up to Al-Tanf base, which I got those bases marked on my map if it's screen shared correctly. They can take up all of that, and then are they going to try to close in at the Euphrates River where the American bases are, where the American Special Forces bases are? And what I mean by that, if people watch the Joe Kent show on the Sean Ryan show, the Sean Ryan show with the interview with Joe Kent, the guy that ran for, I'll just say he's a tier 1 operator that was up there. I won't say what group he's in, but because he didn't want it disclosed up there, but there's not a lot of tier 1 groups. Okay, let me put it that way. So they're controlling along the Euphrates River, and if few people live up here, they could take over a lot of that territory because nobody lives in it. So then what is HTS? HTS is going to be very angry because then they're going to find out that they took over a rump state. Israel took over the rest of it. And they're still not going to control where the oil fields are because the Kurds will. Right. So then how is that going to change the dynamic between the Sunni Arabs and the Sunni Turks that would love to kick out the Americans and the Kurds? So this is going to be a very, very this triumph that the neocons have with Israel and Turkey.
This could realign Turkey with Russia, potentially.
Yes, this is going to go so many different directions, and all Russia has to do, and China, is resupply the hell out of HTS in Tartus and Latakia.
Just give it to Turkey. Turkey will give it to them.
Could give it to them either. Could give it to them also. I'm just pointing out to the listeners what to look for.
Right.
Okay, going forward, what to look for. So, yeah, this could go so many different directions. So, Erdogan, who just backstabbed Putin, could be doing a double backstab and go back to Putin. I mean, this can go so many different directions.
Erdogan is the king of backstabs. I've never seen a guy so capable of backstabbing.
Yeah, and he's again, go back to my maritime, riverine, and terrestrial choke points. How does he get away with that? It's geography. He is going to be the pipeline hub, and he controls that land bridge. And he controls Straits of Dardanelles and Bosphorus that go from the Black Sea to the Marmara Sea to the Aegean Sea. I forgot the Aegean Sea. That was the word I was trying to think of earlier. But he controls that.
If I could add just one thing, George, at this point, compared to 2011, so 13 years later, the Russians have set up a hell of a lot more infrastructure to sell oil and gas to China and India, something that wasn't quite as well developed 13 years ago. Like in many ways, Russia can survive quite well in the state that it's in right now.
Yeah.
Right? Because their revenues have actually even gone up after the SMO, and Europe is paying a higher price and is losing its standard of living. So this is really fascinating what has happened. But please go on.
Oh yeah, okay. There's a few maps I want to bring up.
Yep.
So I'll go ahead and I got them stored away on my computer, but I don't have time to fish around and look for them. So I'll bring up this one. Is that coming through on my screen share?
Yep.
All right. So you have the power of Siberia. Okay. You have the Druzhba pipelines. This is a field map more than a pipeline map, but I already know where they are. The Druzhba pipeline was done during the late 60s, early 70s, going through Belarus, and then you had a southern route that goes through Ukraine, and then to the other countries, and you had the northern route that went to Poland and East Germany. And so it's Europe that's got the biggest pipeline network, end users, and biggest industries. So then Russia, after the Cold War ended, wanted to build more and more pipelines. You know, the South Stream pipeline in the Black Sea, and the Nord Stream pipeline in the North Sea. And then when those things were shut down, either by diplomatic pressure or pipelines, now they have to shift it to the west. So, but in the meantime, they had the oil and gas fields out in Sakhalin Island. People can see the gas fields offshore in the north part of Sakhalin Island and in the south part of Sakhalin Island and in the area in between Hokkaido Island and Sakhalin. So the Russians want to build a pipeline to Hokkaido. Under Shinzo Abe, Japan already built its pipeline network from Nippon Island, the main island, to Hokkaido Island. They now just need 40 miles of undersea pipeline to connect it. under diplomatic pressure from the United States, Shinzo Abe built LNG regasification facilities in Hokkaido Island instead. Mm-hmm. With the same amount of money, they could have built that pipeline. What stopped it? American diplomatic pressure. Again, why? You're back to the 5 power center doctrine.
Yep.
And infrastructural integration means economic integration, which means diplomatic integration, which means military integration. You're back to my dime integration analysis that I'm the only one on the internet doing. The reason why I bring that up is Brian Berletic last month said that there's nobody doing overarching analysis. Everybody only does region analysis. Well, the problem with the reason why the big financial companies don't do it because their models are proprietary. I do it a little bit because, yes, my models are relatively proprietary. But I put some of them out there to give people an idea. But on a general news show, I can't do it because when you start to build grand strategic models, you're using frameworks. All right. Eleanor Roosevelt talked about how intelligent people talk about ideas, and then normal people talk, smarter people talk about events, but most people just talk about other people. So the show's on, if I'm going to frameworks of analysis, that loses 90% of the audience. Mm-hmm. So yes, to answer Brian Berletic, yes, I do the overarching frameworks of analysis, but I can't, it doesn't pay to do it on a general show. So I do it on a show like this or Energy Newsbeat instead, because I'm talking to more of a graduate school audience. So
right.
These overarching frameworks of analysis, the analysts out there love this because I cut to the chase in a 2-hour video. I give them a whole semester's worth of how to do this kind of strategic model building.
Mm-hmm. I sent you, George, in our chat room that we're using right now. I sent you some apps that you might like.
Oh, okay. So anyway, yeah, I can switch maps. So with this map, you can see how Russia is doing. Russia in the heartland. Again, I'm going to be using Speakman's doctrine that's then picked up by Dugin. They have their oil and gas pipelines going to the axial ends of Eurasia. And if Russia, and this is what I did on Working Brother and with Felix Rex, if Russia is in power center number 1, doing a Russo-centric, Kennan-style power center analysis, Russia would be in power center number 1, connected to the German industrial world in power center number 2. And then in India, I put that as power center number 3 as a new industrialized country. And Russia and China would be power center 4. And then power center number 5. Japan and South Korea would be 5 and 6 out on the east. So if these things are connected, in power center number 5 in the east, power center number 6 would still be North America, but they would be isolated.
Yeah.
So in this model, what the United States is trying to prevent is Russia having direct pipeline access to 5 of the 6 global power centers, where Moscow becomes the power center of the world, which was Mackinder's worst nightmare.
Yep.
So that's why after GWAT, Russia being a market economy and selling gas everywhere else, the United States lost its excuse to contain communism. What you find out is the United States is really trying to control Russian natural gas. That's their bigger fear over communism. Mm-hmm. So rather than having a communism domino theory, it's really a Russian natural gas domino theory that the neocons are trying to stop.
Yes.
All right. So when you look at it this way, you had Enrico Mattei that got killed for building the pipelines and trying from Russia and Libya into Europe and paying and wanting to pay in euros, not dollars. Gaddafi in Libya got blown up 50 years later for wanting to trade in gold and euros, not dollars. Herr Hassan was assassinated in '89 for giving the Soviet Union the equipment to build the Druzhba pipeline.
That's right.
And then Shinzo Abe was building the pipeline from Hokkaido to Sakhalin Island. And then he came to an untimely demise. And that other politician in South Korea that wanted to be a make Korea great again guy, he all of a sudden got stabbed in the neck too. Okay, then Robert Fico got shot for wanting to buy Russian natural gas, and pay in rubles. So whoever wants to buy gas from Russia and or pay in non-dollars has their countries invaded or they get assassinated.
Yes.
It's a coincidence, I'm sure.
Yeah, and it's kind of like in all these struggles, there is the pragmatic fiscal concern, devoid of any kind of ideology or religion or any kind of thinking that has any kind of transcendence. And so for the West, of course, it's like, oh my God, aren't you afraid of the evil dictator taking over? And of course, in the Muslim world, we have to regain Jerusalem and so on and so on. But they both use them. They both because no one is going to fight just for no one who's a dirt poor guy is going to fight for something like, hey, dude, you want to risk your life for a better standard of living in 10 years? Like, they're not going to die for that.
Yeah.
Okay. Anyways.
Yeah, I want to go a couple of different directions with that because you're exactly right. Yeah, they use the fear mongering. And let me get through this map, and I want to.
Go ahead.
I posted on our private chat that girl that was so happy. I don't know where she's from, but she said she's going to go back to Syria.
She can't
because
wait.
She's elated. She's elated because it's going to be great.
Her dream came true. Her dream came true.
Okay.
She's not even wearing a hijab. It's like, does she understand what she's going to return to?
Right. She probably left there as a 10-year-old and then went back. Or I'm just throwing numbers out, but
of course.
She probably left as as just a little kid, and then now she's an adult. So she's fantasizing that this great benevolent government is taking power without having any idea what I just talked about or what I've been talking about.
Right. Because she saw the stupid CNN interview, probably.
Oh, yeah. She listens to CNN or BBC or I don't know where she lives. She sounds like American accent or it's not British. So I guess
she had said Ireland in that video. Oh,
okay. Oh, if I had any money, I would buy her the ticket to go there tomorrow.
I'll pitch in.
Sure.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
I love it. That's savage.
If you want somebody to realize how much the legacy media just lies.
Yes.
Yeah. If I could buy her a ticket and buy her a driver for a week or two or three. Oh yeah. Oh, absolutely. But yeah, let's get back to this map because if you want to talk, that would move her from being blue pilled to red pilled to black pilled in a couple of weeks.
Maybe 48 hours.
Maybe, depending on what she sees or doesn't see, right?
That's right.
Oh, then that would throw her into such a cognitive dissonance tailspin. Because I posted those on Working Brothers chat, that video, and they're like, why are you posting that? And I'm like, I want to see what her other videos are I'm doing a longitudinal study on her, right?
Yeah, because she's also a writer.
Oh, okay. This is great. Yeah, if I could buy her the ticket, I would send her. Like, hey, I'll pay your first month or two rent because, well, no, I'll pay your first month's rent and the driver because you won't stay there for 2 months. All right,
Yeah,
so
I took a screen cap so the people can see. She's like, it's hilarious. She's not even wearing a hijab. It's like, honey, this isn't Turkey. This is what you're returning to. Yeah, with Assad, it wouldn't have mattered, but it's gonna matter with these
yeah.
guys.
So this map that's up here is the Russian Far East. So now that had Russia built its Yamal pipeline to China, oh boy, China, that would be the overland logistical supply route. Russia and China would have nothing to worry about. They would be totally sanctions free. What they have built though, the Power of Siberia 1 on the Far East has been up and running for several years. They're building that up.
Yeah,
They're making it.
And number 2 is coming on board too.
Well, Power of Siberia, that's going to take a long time because that goes from Yamal.
Okay.
And it's got to go through. Well, Putin does not. Wait, let me stop here for a second. China wanted it to go to Kazakhstan and tie in with the existing pipeline. Putin doesn't want that because, you're going to, it's a fungible good. Then, the payments are going to be messed up. And both Kazakhstan and Russia sell the same product, so they're competitors. So Putin wants it to go through Mongolia. He wants it,
which makes way more sense because Kazakhstan is the potential for destabilization is very high. Kazakhstan still has something like 3 George Soros universities.
Yes, and
it's a compromised country. You would not want to go through there.
And on top of that, look at the geography, where it would enter China, it would enter into Uyghur territory, and already they've been trying to spark rebellion there for a number of years, in which case that's just ripe for sabotage.
Then we're back to Operation Cyclone that I was talking about, where the United States left that weapon and equipment and left in haste. That's why they did that on purpose. It's to disrupt all of that. So I just wanted to stop you right there and tie it back to what I was talking about because it's a perfect example.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So, this stuff, they've already thought about this in advance. Just read Zbigniew Brzezinski's Grand Chessboard and some of those other books. They've already thought about this way in advance because when we were talking about the Nord Stream project on my Telegram channel, I'm like, wait a second. Can Russia send oil tankers up the Danube River? Okay, there's 12 different locks there. But then we're like, oh, wait a second. That's where they moved the EU and NATO to first. I'm like, okay, they got the riverine checkpoints blocked on every single step of the way around the Black Sea. So, yes, that's why I get to the maritime, riverine, and terrestrial checkpoints all blocked. They did this, this has been on the drawing board for decades. The Brits have always done this. The Brits were in that region to stop Russia getting a warm water port since the Crimean War days. Yep. So just to give people the background information that aren't familiar with that. So I just have to, the geography stays the same. A guy named Strategy Stuff does a great video. He does a great video series on it. On his video on my hand, he talks about, he does a great segment where you want to use sea power. Mahan wanted to use sea power because it prevents countries from getting their product, selling it abroad, gaining wealth to then buy what they need to build up their economy and military. Well, the geography stays the same. The technology difference, technology changes. What Strategy Stuff did not have in his video was that now the best way to send wealth is by railroad. He had railroad up there, but he didn't have oil and gas pipelines. That's a significant omission because that's the best way to send the most wealth. So he needs to adjust that video segment. So he does a great series of videos on that, though. He just needs to add that and electrical power lines from hydroelectric dams. The two best ways to send wealth. So over here, back to the map we got, China and Russia need to accelerate their dime integration, their infrastructural information. By infrastructural information, I mean transportations and communication integration, overland logistical supply routes, and secure communications, fiber optics, telephone lines, that kind of communications. Used to be telegraph, now it's fiber optics, right? So they should have, had they not built Nord Stream, they could have done a much stronger integration. And we were talking about this. I have no idea how long we've been on. It was probably like an hour and a half ago.
Yeah.
But what they want to do is increase that integration, because they'll be completely impervious is the word I'm looking for. Mm-hmm. Completely impervious to sea power sanctions. That's what they're trying to get to.
Yes. That's so the whole One Belt, One Road, Silk Road. That's its entire purpose.
Yeah, I was looking for that word impervious and I couldn't find it. So this map is good because, the power of Siberia is up from the Far East oil fields and the Sakhalin oil fields, and then they added the oil fields connected to it from from that big lake. I forget what you call that big lake.
Baikal.
That one. All the oil and gas fields in that area, they've connected to power of Siberia 1. So from where that started 4 years ago to where it is now, that's a significant change. And if they can rope in the Yamal pipelines to that network, Russia and China have integrated. Okay, now I need to hit Iran. All right, so now why do the neocons, let me switch maps, because why do the neocons want to start a war with Iran so badly? Well, Russia didn't disintegrate, and China's too powerful, so then Iran becomes the weakest link. Yep. So they took the low-hanging fruit and they finished off Assad so they can get the Levantine pipelines and the Syrian pipelines connected to Turkish existing pipeline system. So now they want to pick up the South Caspian Sea pipelines. To do that, you need to destabilize Iran. What I want people to see is there's a triangle between Russia north of the Caspian Sea, Iran south of the Caspian Sea, and then China on the other side. So the United States tried to get into Afghanistan, but the Pashtun want their territory. The Pashtun wanted their territory, and it wasn't Russia and China that were destabilizing the United States in Afghanistan. It's the Saudis, not the Saudi government, but the Arab oil sheiks in Saudi Arabia that was always supporting, they're Islamists. Back to the 70s and 80s, they were supporting the Pashtun, because a lot of Afghanis in the West were reading my LinkedIn posts and saying, "Oh no, we're not a Sunni Salafi Wahhabi country. We're Sufi, or I'm sorry, we're not a Wahhabi country. We're Sufi and Hanafi." And that tells me that they haven't lived there in decades.
Oh,
because what maybe it was in the 1970s, and I did videos on this where we played Rory Stewart's videos on the Great Game, where he goes through the 70s. He's like, this was a hippie hangout going through Iran during the days of the Shah, going through Afghanistan to Shangri-La. up in the Hindu Kush in the Kashmir Mountains in north of Pakistan. He's like, how did it go from, people traveling through here, smoking weed and hashish to, to the Taliban? And then, it's because the Arab oil sheiks, after the Grand Mosque seizure, started building the mosques and madrasas in the Pashtun areas of Pakistan and Afghanistan, and Zbigniew Brzezinski and Stansfield Turner accelerated that with Operation Cyclone. For the 50th time I've said that, so I hope people look that up. Hint, hint. So now, when the United States goes back in to complete the TAPI pipeline, that goes from, it's the TAPI pipeline, Turkmenistan, Afghanistan, Pakistan, India. That's what Unicol and Conoco wanted to build, what surveyed during the 70s, I guess it was, and wanted it to go through all those countries from the Caspian Sea pipeline areas. So people right now, on the map that's up there right now, you can see where the oil and gas fields are. They're pretty huge in the Caspian Sea, north of Iran, and in Turkmenistan, and in Karakum, which is Uzbekistan, and then the Shatlik Dolatab field in that's in the area. You can see where the Amudarya River is there on the map. That separates Afghanistan from Tajikistan, Uzbekistan, and Kyrgyzstan. Well, it just so happens all these different areas all have different Sunni violent extremist groups.
Yeah.
So the United States temporarily left Afghanistan, is funding them with those pallets of cash. The Lynn O'Donnell wonders where the money is going, and Sarah Adams wonders where the money is going. I already told the people on our Telegram channel, those are Dutch Navy guys, I'll put it that way. They're Five Eyes, so I'm allowed to talk to them. Okay.
Yeah.
NATO Five Eyes, I'm allowed to talk to them. And plus, we're talking about open source information. Already, because they asked me what that was about and what's going on in Faizabad. I'm like, well, those groups are made to their own rational actor belief preference constraint models. They're there to, the foreign fighters are there to obliterate the boundaries between Afghanistan, Turkmenistan, and all the stands to rebuild the Khorasan. Well, it looks like the Western discrete entities are covertly funding those groups to destabilize that area. Why? Because they want to destabilize Iran, because they want to reroute the natural gas pipelines underneath the Caspian Sea to Turkey to get to Europe.
Yes.
So Iran is the weakest link to access all those oil and gas fields that are on that map. And the neocons' eyes are water, they salivate over this.
Yes.
And they're going to destabilize Iran. And then what happens? They're going to destabilize Iran because you got the Baluch independence movement in the south of Iran, and you got the Azeris in northern Iran and the Kurds. Now, Aliyev and Erdogan would love to see Iran disintegrate, because then they get to rebuild the Turkish Ottoman Empire across the Caspian Sea that way. Through, the Armenians are in a way, but if they can get through the Zengezur Pass and control southern Armenia and southern Nagorno-Karabakh, which is what the war is about, and Israel's funding that, by the way. Yep. They want to get that Ottoman Empire going through Iran, which is, the Persians came in. That was a Turkic area, and the Persians do come from the steppes. In a way, they are kind of a Turkic people, but the Turks really want them out of the way, because they look at them as invaders for territory that they once held. So, Yeah, the neocons want to destabilize Iran, but again, they don't know what the follow-on consequences are. That's why we're looking at the motives of the neocons as oil fields, but the motives for Erdogan and Aliyev is to reunite the Turkic Empire, but the black flags of the Khorasan are going to take this chaos and they're going to attack Israel. That's why Israel and the U.S. are attacking the arms depots. So that's why I'm saying the counter to that is the Russians now resupply these groups, and then it's turnabout as fair play again.
Yeah, I mean, if the Russians can work with the Taliban in order to counter American interests in Central Asia, they can switch with HTS.
Yeah. And then again, that explains why the Russians aren't leaving Latakia and Tartus ports. For those that are wondering, I already know the answer.
I mean, I thought about it, George, and I thought it's too soon to tell.
No, it's not.
And I heard arguments that the Russians are going to leave, et cetera, et cetera. But it's been a week, and they're still there.
Yeah.
And there were some Turkmen that tried before December 6th, December 7th, around there, to take over in the Latakia thing, and the Russians wiped them out. I mean, of course, they have an air force. The other guys don't. And I haven't heard anything since.
Yeah, all right. Let me just.
It's going to be very interesting to watch.
Yeah, let me just take another one of my real wild guesses. I'm going to take a real wild guess.
Okay.
And say that, since Assad's been going back and forth to Moscow, my wild guess is that they planned this out. So that would be the first half of the wild guess. The other half of the wild guess would be Putin sent envoys to Saudi Arabia, Dubai, Qatar, Abu Dhabi, and got in touch with, the Sunni violent extremist organizations and already floated the idea of this.
Incredible.
Wow. I mean, in other words, Stevie Wonder should be able to see. I lived in this area for a long time. So for me, Stevie Wonder can see this coming. This is only going to fool the American public.
Oh my gosh, that's hilarious.
It shouldn't fool anybody that's been over there like I have, watching these historical videos on the history of the Turkic people, the history of the Persian Empire, the history of the Afghan Pashtun Durrani empires. When you watch these long form videos and then you do an overlay of the energy and pipeline maps, all of a sudden this becomes easy to see.
Yeah. Yeah, that's phenomenal.
Anything else you want to bring up?
No, it's great.
No idea
it is around 11:30, and unfortunately, I have to go to work tomorrow morning. So
I was just about to say we are coming up on the 3-hour mark. So
but
I was just going
George,
to.
This was phenomenal, man. Thank you.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Wow.
If anybody, okay, let's close out on this. If you can edit this and post those maps, I know you guys have jobs, but if you can post these maps up, you'll push people. This will be one of the most watched videos around.
Okay? I believe it.
Thank you, everyone, for tuning in to this episode of The War Report. We will see you guys next time, and goodbye.
Thank you, and take care, guys.